Something Wicked This Way Comes, by Bradbury. Chapter 11. Midnight then, and the town clocks chiming on toward 1 and 2 and then 3 in the deep morning, and the peals of the great clock shaking dust off old toys in high attics, and shedding silver off old mirrors in yet higher attics, and stirring up dreams about clocks in all the beds where children slept. Will heard it. Muffled away in the prairie lands, the chuffing of an engine, the slow following dragon glide of a train. Will sat up in bed. Across the way, like a mirror image, Jim sat up too. A calliope began to play, oh so softly, grieving to itself, a million miles away. In one single motion, Will leaned from his window, as did Jim. Without a word, they gazed over the trembling surf of trees. Their rooms were high, as boys' rooms should be. From these gaunt windows, they could rifle-fire their gaze artillery distances past library, city hall, depot, cow barns, farmlands, empty prairie. There, on the world's rim, the lovely snail gleam of the railway tracks ran, flinging wild gesticulations of lemon or cherry-colored sephamore to the stars. There, on the precipice of earth, a small steam feather uprose like the first of a storm cloud yet to come. The train itself appeared, link by link, engine, coal car, numerous in number, all asleep in slumbering, dream-filled cars, that followed the firefly spark chant, drowsy autumn hearth fire roar. Fires flushed the stunned hills. Even at this remote view, one imagined men with buffalo-hunched arms, shoveling black meteor falls of coal into the open boilers of the engine. The engine! Both boys vanished, came back to lift binoculars. The engine! Civil War! No other stack like that since 1900. The rest of the train, all of it's old. The flags, the cages, it's the carnival. They listened. At first, Will thought he heard the air whistling fast in his nostrils. But no, it was the train, and the calliope sighing, weeping on that train. Sounds like church music. Hell, why would a carnival play church music? Don't say hell, hissed Will. Hell. Jim ferociously leaned out. I've saved up all day. Everyone's asleep, so... Hell. The music drifted by their windows. Goose pimples rose big as boils on Will's arms. That is church music. Changed. For crying out loud. I'm froze. Let's go watch them set up. At 3 a.m.? At 3 a.m.! Jim vanished. For a moment, Will watched Jim dance around over there, shirt uplifted, pants going on, while off in night country, panting, churning was this funeral train all black-plumed cars, licorice-colored cages, and a sooty calliope clamoring, baying 3 different hymns mixed and lost, maybe not there at all. Here goes nothing! Jim slid down the drain pipe on his house, toward the sleeping lawns. Jim, wait! Will thrashed into his clothes. Jim, don't go alone! And followed after. Chapter 12. Sometimes you see a kite so high, so wise, it almost knows the wind. It travels, then chooses to land in one spot, and no other, and no matter how you yank, run this way or that, it will simply break its cord, seek its resting place, and bring you, blood-mouthed, running. Jim, wait for me! So now Jim was the kite, the wild twine cut, and whatever wisdom was his taking him away from Will, who could only run, earthbound, after one so high and dark and silent and suddenly strange. Jim, here I come! And running, Will thought, boy, it's the same old thing. I talk, Jim runs. I tilt stones, Jim grabs the cold junk under the stones and lickety-split. I climb hills, Jim yells off church steeples. I got a bank account, Jim's got the hair on his head, the yell in his mouth, the shirt on his back, and the tennis shoes on his feet. How come I think he's richer? Because, Will thought, I sit on a rock in the sun and old Jim, he prickles his arm hairs by moonlight and dances with hot hop-toads. I tend cows. Jim tames Gila monsters. Fool! I yell at Jim. Coward! He yells back. And here we go! And they ran from town, across fields, and both froze under a rail bridge with the moon ready beyond the hills, and the meadows trembling with a fur of dew. Wham! The carnival train thundered the bridge. The calliope wailed. There's no one playing it! Jim stared up. Jim, no jokes! Mother's honor, look! Going away, away, the calliope pipe shimmered with star explosions, but no one sat at the high keyboard. The wind, sluicing ice-water air in the pipes, made the music. The boys ran. The train curved away, gonging its undersea funeral bell, sunk, rusted, green moss, tolling, tolling. Then the engine whistle blew a great steam whiff, and Will broke out in pearls of ice. Way late at night, Will had heard, how often, Train whistles jetting steam along the rim of sleep, forlorn, alone and far, no matter how near they came. Sometimes he woke to find tears on his cheek, asked why, lay back, listened and thought, yes, they make me cry. Going east, going west, trains so far gone in country deeps, they drown in tides of sleep that escape the towns. Those trains and their grieving sounds were lost forever between stations, not remembering where they had been, not guessing where they might go, exhaling their last pale breaths over the horizon, gone. So it was with all trains ever. Yet this train's whistle, the wails of a lifetime were gathered in it, from other nights and other slumbering years. The howl of moon-dreamed dogs, the seep of river-cold winds through January porch screens, which stopped the blood, 1,000 fire sirens weeping, or worse, the outgone shreds of breath, the protests of 1 billion people dead or dying, not wanting to be dead, their groans, their sighs, burst over the earth. Tears jumped to Will's eyes. He lurched, he knelt, he pretended to lace one shoe. But when he saw Jim's hands clap his ears, his eyes wet too. The whistle screamed. Jim screamed against the scream. The whistle shrieked. Will shrieked against the shriek. Then the billion voices ceased, instantly, as if the train had plunged into a firestorm off the earth. The train skimmed on softly, slithering, black pennants fluttering, black confetti lost on its own sick, sweet candy wind. Down the hill, with the boys pursuing, the air so cold they ate ice cream with each breath. They climbed a last rise to look down. "Boy," whispered Jim. The train had pulled off into Rolf's Moon Meadow, so called because town couples came out to see the moon rise here, over a land so wide, so long, it was like an inland sea, filled with grass in spring, or hay in late summer, or snow in winter. It was fine walking here along its crisp shore, with the moon coming up to tremble in its tides. Well, the carnival train was crouched there now in the autumn grass, on the old rail spur near the woods, and the boys crept and lay down under a bush, waiting. "It's so quiet," whispered Will. The train just stood in the middle of the dry autumn field. No one in the locomotive, no one in the tender, no one in any of the cars behind, all black under the moon, and just the small sounds of its metal cooling, ticking on the rails. Said Jim, "I feel them moving in there." Will felt the cat fuzz on his body bramble up by the thousand. "You think they mind us watching?" "Maybe," said Jim happily. "And why the noisy calliope?" "I figure that," Jim smiled. "I'll tell you. Look." Whisper. As if exhaling itself straight down from the sky, a vast moss-green balloon touched at the moon. It hovered 200 yards above and away, quietly riding the wind. The basket under the balloon. Someone in it! But then a tall man stepped down from the train caboose platform, like a captain assaying the tidal weathers of this inland sea. All dark suit, shadow-faced, he waded to the center of the meadow, his shirt as black as the gloved hands he now stretched to the sky. He gestured, once, and the train came to life. At first a head lifted in one window, then an arm, then another head like a puppet in a marionette theater. Suddenly 2 men in black were carrying a dark tent pole out across the hissing grass. It was the silence that made Will pull back, even as Jim leaned forward, eyes moon-bright. A carnival should be all growls, roars, like timberlands stacked, bundled, rolled, and crashed, great explosions of lion dust, men ablaze with working anger, pop bottles jangling, horse buckles shivering, engines and elephants in full stampede through rains of sweat, while zebras neighed and trembled, like cage trapped in cage. But this was like old movies, the silent theater haunted with black and white ghosts, silvery mouths opening to let moonlight smoke out, gestures made in silence, so hushed you could hear the wind fizz the hair on your cheeks. More shadows rustled from the train, passing the animal cages where darkness prowled with unlit eyes, and the calliope stood mute save for the faintest idiot tune the breeze piped wandering up the flues. The ringmaster stood in the middle of the land. The balloon, like a vast moldy green cheese, stood fixed to the sky. Then, darkness came. The last thing Will saw was the balloon swooping down, as clouds covered the moon. In the night sky, he felt the men rush to unseen tasks. He sensed the balloon, like a great fat spider, fiddling with the lines and poles, rearing a tapestry in the sky. The clouds arose. The balloon sifted up. In the meadow stood the skeleton main poles and wires of the main tent, waiting for its canvas skin. More clouds poured over the white moon. Shadows. Will shivered. He heard Jim crawling forward, seized his ankle, felt him stiffen. "Wait," said Will. They're bringing out the canvas. No, said Jim. Oh, no. For somehow instead, they both knew. The wires high flung on the poles were catching swift clouds, ripping them free from the wind in streamers which, stitched and sewn by some great monster shadow, made canvas and more canvas as the tent took shape. At least, there was the clear water sound of vast flags blowing. The motion stopped. The darkness within darkness was still. Will lay, eyes shut, hearing the beat of great oil-black wings of a huge, ancient bird had drummed down to live, to breathe, to survive in the night shadow. The clouds blew away. The balloon was gone. The men were gone. The tents rippled like black rain on their poles. Suddenly it seemed a long way to town. Instinctively, Will glanced behind himself. Nothing but grass and whispers. Slowly he looked back at the tent. Dark, seemingly empty tents. I don't like it, he said. Jim could not tear his eyes away. Yeah, he whispered. Yeah. Will stood up. Jim lay on the earth. Jim, said Will. Jim jerked his head as if slapped. He was on his knees. He swayed up. His body turned, but his eyes were fastened to those black flags, the great sideshow sign swarming with unguessed wings, horns, and demon smiles. A bird screamed. Jim jumped. Jim gasped. Cloud shadows panicked them over the hills to the edge of town. From there, the two boys ran alone. Chapter 13. The air was cold, blowing in through the wide-open library window. Charles Holloway had stood there for a long time. Now, he quickened. Along the street below fled two shadows. Two boys above them matching shadows stride for stride. They softly printed the night air with treads. "Jim!" cried the old man. "Will!" But not aloud. The boys went away toward home. Charles Holloway looked out into the country, wandering along the library, letting his broom tell him things no one else could hear. He had heard the whistle and the disjointed calliope hymns. There, he now said, half aloud. 3 a.m. In the meadow, the tents, the carnival waited for someone, anyone to wade along the grassy surf. The great tents filled like bellows. They softly issued forth exhalations of air that smelled like ancient yellow beasts. But only the moon looked in at the hollow dark, the deep caverns. Outside, night beasts hung in mid-gallop on a carousel. Beyond lay fathoms of mirror maze, which housed a multifold series of empty vanities, one wave on another, still, serene, silvered with age, white with time. Any shadow, at the entrance, might stir reverberations the color of fright, unravel deep-buried moons. If a man stood there, would he see himself unfold away, 1,000,000,000 times to eternity? Would 1,000,000,000 images look back, each face and the face after that, older, oldest? Would he find himself lost in a fine dust away off deep down there, not 50, but 60, not 60, but 70, not 70, but 80, 90, 99 years old? The maze did not ask. The maze did not tell. It simply stood and waited like a great Arctic floe. 3 o'clock. Charles Holloway was cold. His skin was suddenly lizard skin. His stomach filled with blood turned to rust. His mouth tasted of night damps. Yet he could not turn from the library window. Far off, something glittered in the meadow. It was moonlight, flashing on a great glass. Perhaps the light said something. Perhaps it spoke in code. I'll go there, thought Charles Holloway. I won't go there. I don't like it. A moment later, the library door slammed. Going home, he passed the empty store window. Inside stood 2 abandoned sawhorses. Between lay a pool of water. In the water floated a few shards of ice. In the ice were a few long strands of hair. The boy saw but chose not to see. He turned and was gone. The street was soon as empty as the hardware store window. Far away, in the meadow, shadows flickered in the mirror maze, as if parts of someone's life, yet unborn, were trapped there, waiting to be lived. So the maze waited, its cold gaze ready, for so much as a bird to come look, see, and fly away shrieking. But no bird came. Chapter 14. 3, a voice said. Will listened, cold but warming, glad to be in with the roof above, floor below, wall and door between, too much exposure, too much freedom, too much night. 3. Dad's voice, home now, moving down the hall, speaking to itself. 3. Why, thought Will, that's when the train came. Had Dad seen, heard, Followed? No, he mustn't. Will hunched himself. Why not? He trembled. What did he fear? The carnival rushing in like a black stampede of storm waves on the shore out beyond? Of him and Jim and Dad knowing? Of the town asleep, not knowing? Was that it? Yes. Will buried himself deep. Yes. 3 in the morning, thought Charles Holloway, seated on the edge of his bed. Why did the train come at that hour? Or, he thought, it's a special hour. Women never wake then, do they? They sleep the sleep of babes and children. But men in middle age, they know that hour well. Oh God, midnight's not bad. You wake and go back to sleep. 1 or 2's not bad. You toss but sleep again. 5 or 6 in the morning, there's hope, for dawn's just under the horizon. But 3 now, Christ, 3 a.m. Doctors say the body is at low tide then. The soul is out. The blood moves slow. You're nearest to dead you'll ever be saved, dying. Sleep is a patch of death. But 3 in the morning, all wide-eyed staring, is living death. You dream with your eyes open. God, if you had strength to rouse up, you'd slaughter your half-dreams with buckshot. But no, you lie pinned to a deep well-bottom that's burned dry. The moon rolls by to look at you down there, with its idiot face. It's a long way back to sunset, a far way on to dawn, to summon all the fool things of your life, the stupid lovely things done with people known so very well who are now so very dead. And wasn't it true? Had he read it somewhere? More people in hospitals die at 3 a.m. than at any other time? Stop! He cried silently. Charlie? His wife said in her sleep. Slowly, he took off the other shoe. His wife smiled in her sleep. Why? She's immortal. She has a son. Your son, too. What father ever really believes it? He carries no burden. He feels no pain. What man, like woman, lies down in darkness and gets up with child? The gentle, smiling ones own the good secret. Oh, what strange, wonderful clocks women are. They nest in time. They make the flesh that holds fast and binds eternity. They live inside the gift, no power except, and need not mention of it. Why speak of time when you are time, and shape the universal moments, as they pass, into warmth and action? How men envy and often hate these warm clocks, these wives, who know they will live forever. So what do? We men turn terribly mean, because we can't hold to the world or ourselves or anything. We are blind to continuity. All breaks down, falls, melts, stops, rots, or runs away. So, since we cannot shape time, where does that leave men? Sleepless, staring. 3 a.m. That's our reward. 3 in the morn. The soul's midnight. The tide goes out. The soul ebbs. And a train arrives at an hour of despair. Why? Charlie? His wife's hand moved to his. You. All right, Charlie? She drowsed. He did not answer. He could not tell her how he was. Chapter 15. The sun rose yellow as a lemon. The sky was round and blue. The birds looped clear water songs in the air. Will and Jim leaned from their windows. Nothing had changed, except the look in Jim's eyes. Last night, said Will. Did or didn't it happen? They both gazed toward the far meadows. The air was sweet as syrup. They could find no shadows anywhere, even under the trees. 6 minutes, cried Jim. 5. 4 minutes later, cornflakes lurching in their stomachs, they frisked the leaves to a fine red dust going out of town. With a wild flutter of breath, they raised their eyes from the earth they had been treading. And the carnival was there. Hey, for the tents were lemon like the sun, brass like wheat fields a few weeks ago. Flags and banners bright as bluebirds snapped above lion-colored canvas. From booths painted cotton candy colors. Fine Saturday smells of bacon and eggs, hot dogs and pancakes, swam the wind. Everywhere ran boys. Everywhere, sleepy fathers followed. It's just a plain old carnival, said Will. Like heck, said Jim. We weren't blind last night. Come on. They marched 100 yards straight on and deep into the midway. And the deeper they went, the more obvious it became that they would find no nightmen cat-treading balloon shadow, while strange tents plumed like thunderclouds. Instead, close up, the carnival was mildewed rope, moth-eaten canvas, rain-worn, sun-bleached tinsel. The sideshow paintings hung like sad albatrosses on their pole, flapped and let fall flakes of ancient paint, shivering and at the same time revealing the Unwondrous wonders of a thin man, fat man, needlehead, tattooed man, hula dancer. They prowled on, but found no mysterious midnight spheres of evil gas tied by mysterious oriental knots to daggers plunged in dark earth. No maniac ticket-takers bent on terrible revenges. The calliope by the ticket booth neither screamed deaths nor hummed idiot songs to itself. The train pulled off on a spur in the warming grass. It was old, yes, and welded tight with rust, but it looked like a titanic magnet that had collected to itself from locomotive boneyards across 3 continents, drive shafts, flywheels, smokestacks, and hand-me-down second-rate nightmares. It did not cut a black and mortuary silhouette. It asked permission but to lie dead in autumn strewings, so much tired steam and iron gunpowder blowing away. Jim, Will! Here came Miss Foley, their 7th-grade schoolteacher, along the midway. All smiled. Boys, she said, what's wrong? Look as if you lost something. Will, well, said Will. Last night, did you hear that calliope? Calliope? No. Then why are you out here so early, Miss Foley? Asked Jim. I love carnival, said Miss Foley, a little woman lost somewhere in her gray 50s, beaming around. I'll buy hot dogs and you eat while I look for my fool nephew. You seen him? Nephew? Robert, staying with me for a few weeks. Father's dead. Mother's sick in Wisconsin. I took him in. He ran out here early today. Said he'd meet me. But you know, boys. My, you look glum. She shoved food at them. Eat. Cheer up. Rides will open in 10 minutes. Meanwhile, I think I'll spy through that mirror maze and... No, said Will. No what? Asked Miss Foley. No mirror maze. Will swallowed. He stared at fathoms of reflections. You could never strike bottom there. It was like winter standing tall, waiting to kill you with a glance. Miss Foley, he said at last, and wondered to hear his mouth say it. Don't go in there. Why not? Jim peered, fascinated, into Will's face. Yeah, tell us. Why not? People get lost, said Will lamely. All the more reason. Robert might be wandering, loose, and not find his way out if I don't grab his ear. Never can tell. Will could not take his eyes off the millions of miles above blind glass. But might be swimming around in there. Swimming, Miss Foley laughed. What a lovely mind you have. What a lovely mind you have, Willie. Yes, but I'm an old fish, so... Miss Foley! Miss Foley waved, poised, took a step, and vanished into the mirror ocean. They watched as she settled, wandered, sank deep, deep, and was finally dissolved, gray among silver. Jim grabbed Will. What was all that? Gosh, Jim, it's the mirrors. They're the only things I don't like. I mean, they're the only things like last night. Boy, you've been out in the sun, snorted Jim. That maze there is... His voice trailed off. He sniffed the cold air blowing out as from an ice house between the tall reflections. Jim, you were saying? Jim said nothing. After a long time, he clapped his hand to the back of his neck. It really does, he cried in soft amaze. What does? There, I read it all my life, in scary stories. It stands on end. Mine's doing it now. Gosh, Jim, so's mine. They stood entranced with the delicious cold bumps on their necks, and the suddenly stiffened small hairs quilled up over their scalps. There was a flourish of light and shadow. Bumping out through the mirror maze, they saw 2, 4, a dozen Miss Foleys. They didn't know which one was real, so they waved to all of them. But none of the Miss Foley saw or waved back. Blind, she walked. Blind, she tacked her nails to cold glass. Miss Foley! Her eyes, flexed wide as from blasts of photographic powder, were skinned white like a statue. Sorry. Her eyes, flexed wide as from blasts of photographic powder, were skinned white like a statue's. Deep under the glass, she spoke, she murmured, she whimpered. Now she cried, now she shouted, now she yelled. She knocked glass with her head, her elbows, tilted it drunken as a light-blind moth, raised her hands and claws. Oh, God! Help! She wailed. Help! Oh, God! Jim and Will saw their own faces, pale, their own eyes wide, in the mirrors as they plunged. Miss Foley! Here! Jim cracked his brow. This way! But Will found only cold glass. A hand flew from empty space. A woman's hand, sinking for the last time. It seized anything to save itself. The anything was Will. She pulled him under. Will! Jim! Jim! And Jim held him, and he held her, and pulled her free of the silently rushing mirrors coming in, from the desolate seas. They stepped into sunlight. Miss Foley, one hand to her bruised cheek, bleated, muttered, then laughed, quickly, then gasped, and wiped her eyes. Thank you, Will, Jim. Oh, thank you. I'd have drowned. Oh, Will, you were right. My God, did you see her? She's lost, drowned in there, poor girl. Oh, the poor lost sweet. Save her. Oh, we must save her. Miss Foley, boy, you're hurting. Will firmly removed her fist from clenching the flesh of his arm. There's no one in there. I saw her. Please, look. Save her. Will jumped to the maze entrance and stopped. The ticket-taker gave him an idle glance of contempt. Will backed away to Miss Foley. I swear, no one went in ahead of you, or after you, ma'am. It's my fault. I joked about the water. You must have got mixed up, lost, and scared. What if she heard? She went on biting the back of her hand. Her voice the voice of someone come out the sea after no air. A long dread, time deep. No hope of life, and now set free. Gone? She's at the bottom. Poor girl. I knew her. I know you. I said when I first saw her a minute ago. I waved. She waved. Hello. I ran. Bang. I fell. She fell. 12, 1,000 of her fell. Wait, I said. Oh, she looked so fine, so lovely, so young. But it scared me. What are you doing here? I said. Why, I think she said, I'm real. You're not. She laughed. Went underwater. She ran off in the maze. We must find her before... Miss Foley, Will's arms spun around her, took a last trembling breath, and grew strangely quiet. Jim was staring deep into those cold mirrors, looking for sharks that could not be seen. Miss Foley, he said, what did she look like? Miss Foley's voice was pale but calm. The fact is, she looked like myself many, many years ago. I'll go home now, she said. Miss Foley, Will. No, stay. I'm just fine. Have fun, boys. Enjoy. And she walked slowly away, alone, down the midway. Somewhere, a vast animal made water. Ammonia made the wind turn ancient as it passed. I'm leaving, said Will. Will, said Jim. We're staying until sundown, boy. Dark sundown. And figure it all. You chicken? No, murmured Will, but... They want to dive back in that maze? Jim gazed fiercely deep into the bottomless sea, where now only the pure light glanced back at itself, held up emptiness upon emptiness, beyond emptiness before their eyes. Nobody. Jim let his heart beat twice. I guess.